Hello, everybody. My name is Jordan Dierkson, and this is the Dierkson Discussion. On today's show, we're going to talk about a main problem that I have identified that I believe is pertinent to today's world, which is the mass disconnect between the left and the right side of the political spectrum on conversations, as well as the resulting fallout from the recent assassination of Charlie Kirk, father, Turning Point USA founder, and ultimately Christian. Now, to start this, I believe we need to have some context when it comes to the disconnect of the left and the right on conversations. Because if you rewind the clock 20 years ago, 2004, 2005, during that election of George W. Bush, what you find is that we still had relatively unpolarized politics. Things were starting to heat up after the Iraq War, after 2001, after 9/11. There were still heightened emotions. However, we were still able to converse as a nation and as a people and ultimately as a governing body with some sense of civil discourse, with some sense of niceties and politeness and mutual respect. People on the left didn't view people on the right as evil and vice versa. But then with the election of Barack Obama in 2008, calling to be a unified people, that there are no white Americans, there are no black Americans, there is only Americans. We are one America. And then proceeding to be one of the most polarizing and ununifying presidents in the modern era. And then with the election in 2012 with Joe Biden saying Mitt Romney is going to quote unquote put y'all back in chains, and if you're not black if you don't vote Democrat, you can clearly see kind of the point where the tensions and the polarization began spiking. And it's not just confined to one side of the aisle, because then you had the nomination and ultimately election of Donald J. Trump in 2016, who was essentially a giant middle finger to everybody on the left side of the aisle. I mean, the man was pretty much dead in the water 3 weeks before the actual election on November 8th. Every poll showed Hillary Clinton leading, that she was going to win in a landslide. Trump had no hope. You had the grab them by the genitalia scandal. You had the locker room talk. You had just ultimately his personality and a strong entertainer side of him showing up at all the wrong times. But then Trump wins Florida, everybody starts getting a little nervous, and then Hillary ultimately calls and concedes the election. And Trump was called a Nazi, called Hitler, and ultimately you had Russiagate saying that he was a Russian pawn. Now, the reason why this context is important, because I think most of the people listening to this do remember, COVID, and then 2020 with Joe Biden's election, and then fast forward to 2024 with Donald Trump's second election, or his re-election, that this context is important because it highlights where the break started to happen and what wedges were driven into that gap to widen it into now a chasm. I can't remember who it was. I heard this quote, but it was a political philosopher who essentially boiled down the debate between left and right to this, where oftentimes Republicans and conservatives, we view, and I say we because I am conservative, welcome to the show, we view people on the left side of the aisle oftentimes as ill-informed. We think their heart is in the right place. However, they're ill-informed, or they're just stupid. That's the best and most simple way to put it. They're just stupid. They don't know the stats. They don't know the information. They're not reaching logical conclusions. They're being irrational, which oftentimes can be the case. However, with the polarization between the left and the right side of the aisle, that has kind of really faded away in recent times, to where now, on the other side of the spectrum, leftists oftentimes view Republicans, and especially conservatives, as people who are evil and hateful. Not that they're ill-informed, not that they're unintelligent, even though they do view us as unintelligent, but as we're evil people. We're bigots, we're neo-Nazis, we're racist, we're sexist, and it's not the case at all. The thing is that leads into the conversations that we have with one another. Like why would you debate somebody or even converse with them or willingly be in a same room and show politeness and respect to that person if you think they're hateful or that they want to, quote unquote, destroy you? This is especially prevalent with the trans ideology. I mean, for heaven's sake, if you misgender somebody at a restaurant as a waiter, you're going to get screamed down and shouted down. There are countless videos online of people who are trans intentionally setting up their phone, waiting for somebody to misgender them, and then next thing you know, they have an opportunity to be a Karen or shout somebody down, yell at them, I'm a man, not a woman, or I'm a woman, not a man. The one that comes to mind is the man from GameStop who's dressed like a woman but is very clearly a man. I mean, he's 6'5". He's got like shoulder length blonde hair. He looks like Thor, and is screaming at the clerk, "It's ma'am." I mean, and they became an online sensation, an internet meme. I mean, that's just one example of the many of hundreds I guarantee you can go online and find. But it's especially clear and especially prevalent that if you think that person hates you, and two people who have this and buy in to this indoctrination and this left-wing ideology, why would you ever converse with somebody who you think hates every fiber of your being and wants to destroy you? You'd never even go into the same room with them willingly if you know that. And it breaks it down to Greek philosophy, which is the three arguments, which it said that the best arguments are often tailored and incorporate all three of these parts, which is pathos, logos, and ethos. Pathos being emotional, logos being informational, and then ethos being authority. And oftentimes, the disconnect is especially clear when you look at it through that context of leftists like to debate and use rationale from pathos, from the emotional side of things. We have to be understanding of these people, of illegal immigrants, because they're here for a better life, and we're the best country on the planet. They like to say we're the best country on the planet for illegal immigrants, but then turn around and say this country is racist and it's the worst place to ever exist, even though it's the richest, fairest, and most free nation ever in the history of mankind, bar none. Whereas people on the right side of the aisle use logos. They use that informational approach. Ben Shapiro famously says, facts don't care about your feelings, which is true. The statistics are the statistics, whether you like them or not. Okay, you can cherry pick data, but it doesn't matter. Everything is still out there. Everything is still there. It's still prevalent. But this is where the disconnect happens, because if you're making an emotional argument, you are not going to listen to logic or reason, because emotions defy logic and reason. I mean, by all accounts of the mean, if your dog is trapped in your house and it's on fire, logically, everything should say, you're alive, you're out, don't go back in there. You can and will die, potentially, if you go into that burning house to save your dog. But your emotional side says, screw the logic, screw the reasoning, Johnny Boy's in there, I'm rushing into that burning building like Spider-Man and grabbing my dog and getting him out because I love him and I care about him. Emotions are irrational things, and they're necessary in order for us to navigate the world like how we were created to do so. But the things in a debate and in a conversation and in policy and in politics and even in culture, they don't line up. They don't. It's like two tectonic plates. I mean, one slides over, one goes under, and they don't meet. Okay? And it's impossible to get somewhere. It's like that common phrase of you can't argue with an idiot because an idiot doesn't will never listen to reason. They're going to believe they're right no matter what. And I know it seems right now that I'm being harsh, and it seems like there's no way for us to solve this problem of this disconnect between left versus right, but there is, and it's important because that's why we have to have conversations. That's why people on the left have to be willing to take a step into what they may think is the lion's den, and 5 minutes into the conversation realize this person's not mean, this person's not evil, they're not out to get me. And it's up to us on the right side of the aisle when we have the opportunity for those conversations to have them, but also to not demonize that person, to not make them. We have to have a little bit more of emotional understanding, just like the left has to have a little bit more of a logical understanding. We need to come to a balance because right now we each are high on our own supply, and we need to find a balance. Oftentimes, that's where the best solutions to any problem come up with is somewhere in the middle ground. Okay? That's why, Democrats used to be the party of the working class. They used to advocate for workers' rights, for workers' rights, for unions, for everything. And the right side of the aisle was typically seen as an advocate for big business, for economic expansion, economic growth, and lower taxes and less government. And those two things oftentimes collide. If you're advocating for businesses and for a better economy and for bigger profits and more money, the worker can be overlooked. They can be subverted. But then you have the left side of the aisle rising up and going, hey, no, workers are important. Child care is important. Child labor laws, a 40-hour work week, maternity leave. These things all came about because of advocation for workers' rights and finding a healthy balance between left and right. Because both sides of the aisle oftentimes do have good points. Oftentimes they do diagnose problems correctly, but it's the solutions that are oftentimes different. And it's never black and white. It's never, well, the right is entirely correct and the left is entirely wrong, and vice versa. It's never that. There's oftentimes the best solution is found with parts from both. But we've lost that. We've lost being able to find that middle ground or common ground. And so, like I said, the solution has to be, each side of the aisle has to be a little bit more understanding. We on the right side of the aisle, oftentimes, since we're the more religious of this side of the spectrum, we're willing to be a little bit more understanding. We're willing to be a little bit more emotional. But it's the left that is oftentimes spitting in our faces, both figuratively and literally. It's as J.D. Vance said today, because we're recording this September 15th on the Charlie Kirk show, that we cannot have unity with people who adamantly and fundamentally hate us. There can be no unity with that. And so each side has to lower the temperature, and each side has to be willing to have these conversations. And I know if you're a Republican and you're on the right side of the aisle and you're listening to this, you're like, I entirely am. And I'm not calling you out, because this message right here is directed towards the people on the left side of the aisle. You have to turn down the rhetoric. You have to stop the demonization. It's not appropriate. It's not okay anymore. People are literally dying. In the last 2 years, we've had an assassination attempt on Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh and his family. We had 2 assassination attempts on Donald J. Trump, the sitting president of the United States, then presidential candidate. We just saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk this past week. And taking the stance, the absolute ignorant stance of saying, oh, well, we both have to turn down the temperature. We both have to turn... No. Because it's only coming from one side of the aisle right now. And it's the classic thing of Republicans see a problem that Democrats created. Democrats don't say anything about it. But then Republicans point it out, and Democrats are like, Republicans are pouncing. Republicans are mean. Oh, they're out to get us. They're saying this. Oh, they think this is a problem, but it's not really a problem. They're ignoring the real problem, which is affordability or the immigration crisis or, over policing. I mean, it's like, for Christ's sakes, this is a problem. And the institutions have been taken over. I mean, they've been taken over by left-leaning and left-wing ideologies. I mean, take a look at the New York Times, the despicable newspaper, who prints Hassan Reddick, somebody who has said that, Hitler may have been right, or tries to justify 9/11, or supports the Palestinian quote-unquote cause and country and people. I mean, they print an op-ed where essentially the dude's saying Charlie Kirk deserved what happened to him, which is entirely ludicrous and insane. But there's that disconnect. There's just blatantly obvious the ignorance to say that they are not perpetrating the problem and creating permission structures for violence and these attacks to happen is insane. It's insane. And it's up to us as a civil society, whether you're independent, Republican, or Democrat, to call it out and go, hey, that's not okay. That's not right. We as a nation, especially us as men, we have to start advocating and standing up for what is right. For far too long, we have been too apathetic, too uncaring, to just let things slide by. But now it's time to be strong. We have to be, because there's nobody else that's going to do it. And if we're not strong, we're going to ran over. Completely run over. And that brings me to something that's popular today, is that the fallout from Charlie Kirk's assassination. Specifically, I'm talking about the things we're seeing online with the mass firings and such. And I've heard a couple different perspectives. Some people think it's okay and they want more of it. Others think it's totally unabashedly wrong. And my perspective is, let's have more of it. Let's have more of it. And people are saying that, well, it's infringing upon these people's freedom of speech. And for those of you who don't know, there has been kind of a mass firing spree going on at a variety of companies because their employees are posting on their personal social medias, essentially celebrating or cheering the death of Charlie Kirk, saying he deserved what he got. We need more of this. Some are even saying, do this person next, whether it's Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, Candace Owens, or Alex Jones. Some people I even saw some posts that were like, let's get Joe Rogan next. I mean, come on. That's insane to me. But these firings are happening because companies are saying, we're not going to employ people who support this. And I think it's a good sign. It's a good sign that our society is beginning to heal a little bit and return to a sense of what you'd call normalcy 5-10 years ago. Because I understand the arguments that it's their freedom of speech. However, freedom of speech applies to law. That's what you must understand, is that no law shall be made to infringe upon the freedom of speech. Or the freedom of gathering or religion. It's not the government making laws saying if you celebrated Charlie Kirk's death, you should be fired and you're out of a job. It's not the government at all doing that. It's private companies making that decision. And the funny thing is that people on the left are entirely fine letting private companies deplatform people like YouTube or Twitter before Elon Musk bought it for their conservative leaning views, saying they're private companies, they can make their own decisions, they can do what they want. But then when that lever of power is turned on them, they go, this is unjust, this is wrong, it's a threat to our democracy and everything else. And it's not. It's not. Because from a law side of things, no law has been broken. They're not infringing upon your First Amendment rights. You're saying some pretty terrible and shitty things as a human being that the company no longer wants to pay you. They don't want to employ you. They don't want to have you on their staff. And it's indicative, it could be indicative of a variety of things. As somebody who has hired people and fired people a lot, even at just a young age, and has ran multi-million-dollar businesses before, not only does a person's work ethic matter and their timeliness, but also their character, because it indicates a variety of different things that do directly affect your job performance. It's good. I mean, it's as a human being with a sense of morals, you cannot see these videos of these people celebrating a man's death who leaves behind a widow and two very, very young kids. His daughter is 3. His son is 1 year old. 1. He won't even remember the man's face when he grows older. He'll only be able to see him through pictures. It's terrible seeing these videos online of people celebrating his death. It's absolutely despicable. And like I said, I think it's a good thing because it means we're returning to a civil society. Michael Knowles said this last Wednesday on the day of Charlie's death. Sorry to take a drink there. Michael Knowles said this of, we need to stand a little bit firmer. We need to correct people. We have to, in order to kind of get back to a sense of normalcy. Because, I mean, in my opinion, for too long, we've been too nice. We have. We've been too understanding. We've been too caring. I mean, honestly, we've been too willingly ignorant to ignore these slights to people's individual humanity and to our humanity. I don't care if it's Charlie Kirk or if it's a random guy in your neighborhood who got shot. Celebrating somebody's death or saying that, oh, at least the population's decreased, or, oh, glad that hateful person's gone, is not right in any sense of the way. Because as human beings, we should value life. We do. The abortion debate is an entirely different thing, but we all should fundamentally be able to agree that life has a very precious value. And it's limited. It's finite. Your life might last 90 years at best, which is why every day is what you make it. The classic sayings you hear at a funeral: every day is what you make it. Live every day like it's your last. You never know. Today could be your last day. Whatever. It's imperative that we take that to heart. And when we see these people online celebrating these things, some sense of their humanity is gone. It's been lost. Either they've been entirely desensitized to these things with the rise of social media and the internet. I mean, you can watch almost the entire Afghanistan war and see people blown up, seen people murdered. There's websites out there where you can go on and see people being electrocuted on live wires to death. People explode. People get beheaded, executed. I mean, unfiltered, uncensored. And it does desensitize you to these types of things. That video that I recommend nobody watch, it's not good for your soul. It's not. Your eyes may be able to ingest that and take that, but your brain and your soul, automatically, it makes you want to vomit. It makes you want to break down to see that happen to somebody with what happened to Charlie. And so I think these mass firings and these people who celebrate this receiving punishment from society and from civility and being kicked out of civil society essentially is good, because it shows that there are consequences to your actions, that there are negative repercussions to you directly for these types of things. And sure, it might not change what's in their hearts, but it's going to return our society to a sense of normalcy and to a balanced part. I mean, it has to. And in doing so, it's going to encourage more of these conversations between left and right. I know this show is called the Dierkson Discussion, and you've only heard my voice. I'm going to, in the future, hope to get other people on to discuss certain topics, to discuss certain world events and issues that we see that are very prevalent. But it takes time to grow things and to get and to reach out to those people and to get that type of outreach. For now, you just get me. But with this, I'll leave this in closing for you. Be firm in your beliefs. Be strong and steadfast and stand up for what you know is right. I don't care if it's Republican leaning, if it's Democrat leaning, if it's centrist or anything. Be morally and intellectually consistent in your beliefs. Because a lot of us we ingest, whether it's from people that we idolize, people that we follow, the news media. We ingest it and we regurgitate it because we're like, that sounds good. And we never ask ourselves the question of why. Ask yourself why. Why do I think that? Why do I agree with that? Why do I believe that? Challenge yourself. Make yourself a little uncomfortable. Because asking yourself why, being challenged like that and asking yourself why, it is the best way for you to be stronger in your beliefs, to provide yourself with a firmer foundation for your arguments. I mean, you have to challenge yourself. If you don't, I mean, you're no different than the people living in echo chambers online, existing in a bubble with their friends and family. If everybody agrees with me, no. Challenge yourself and ask yourself that all-important question of why. Why do I believe this? Why do I like this? Why do I want this? Why do I think this is right? And get an answer to that. Get an answer to the why. Because if you don't, you're nothing more than a mindless zombie that just regurgitates everything that they hear that they think is good. And it means you can be swayed like a sailboat. Whichever way the wind blows, that's where you're going. But you need to be like an anchor, firmly rooted in your beliefs, and it's going to take a lot for you to be swayed. It's going to take a lot to move you. But with that, I'll leave you. My name is Jordan Dierkson, and this has been the Dierkson Discussion.